Anna Rast, welcome to the Leading Saints podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, this is. I've gotten a few recommendations for people from people that I should bring you into the Leading Saints podcast and interview you, and finally they can stop emailing because we've done it. So
it's such a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Cool. Well, maybe just give us a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm actually a service missionary at the church headquarters in the Disabilities Services Department under Priesthood and Family. And I am the disability specialist for the American Fork East Stake. And the first one, and then I was the first disability specialist for about 9 years in the Valencia California Stake.
Interesting.
And so I'd love to share with you a little bit about the calling of disability specialist. It's brand new in the church.
Yeah, when you say brand new, like how new are we talking here?
It's, I think, about 9 years old.
Okay.
But it's right in the bishop's handbook.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of training online you can do. It can be it can be hard because people don't know to come to the disability specialist because often there isn't a disability specialist yet.
Right. Yeah. And that's hopefully with this discussion and you going through some helpful principles and best practices, hopefully stake presidencies, bishoprics can feel encouraged to call someone to this. And now, is it a stake calling, or is the idea to have a stake and a ward disability specialist?
Yes. The idea is to have a stake disability specialist and then have ward disability specialists in every ward.
Okay.
And that's what I have here in American Fork East Stake, and it's the best. You work hand in hand in what you do. Let me tell you a little bit about myself.
Okay.
And how I came to this work. I have 2 kids on the spectrum with autism, and their names are Kirsten and Kevin. And my husband Alan and I, we raised them in the church, and my husband was on location 3/4 of the year. So I, as a convert, it was sometimes a stumble for me to fit into the church, and with a little bit of a square hole family in a round hole world. And so my kids are now adults. They're very high functioning. And my son works for Disney World. And my daughter's an esthetician. And so they're very high functioning now, but they weren't at first. Neither of them had any language until they were about 4 years old.
Wow.
And so, raising kids is hard for everyone. But, and we so appreciated every teacher and leader we had in the church, and for all the great things they did with us. We would always sit down with the leaders or the teachers at the beginning of the year, and we would tell them all about our kids and let them know that we support them. And we talk about strategies. We keep in touch with them throughout the year. And, we make sure we stayed in close touch about their expectations and ideas for how it would work with our kids. And we were so grateful that they were there to help. But as I mentioned, sometimes things went smoothly at activities and classes, and sometimes not so much. For an example of a good story, we had my son, when he was about 3, he loved Godzilla, and he would always do this Godzilla imitation. And in his class, in his primary class, he didn't understand the English, and so it was very it didn't engage his interest. And so we talked to the teacher, and we said, listen, sometimes he does like a Godzilla thing. And sure enough, the first class, he went to the corner of the room and did a Godzilla thing, and during the whole class. And we asked, how's that going? Is he too much of a distraction? And the teacher said, no, he just does his Godzilla thing, and we know he's listening. And the other kids are used to him, so they would say, well, that's just Kevin. And so he was fully included in classes at church before he was ever included in classes for school. Wow. And so that was amazing. One example of a harder situation was that when my son was in Young Men, he hadn't had a lot of away experiences of sleepovers at people's houses. Often when you have autism, you struggle with making and keeping friends. And so he hadn't really had like a best friend that would invite him over. And he didn't have too many family members to invite him over. So, but he wanted to go to youth conference because he wanted to, um, sort of be able to have those away experiences so he could hopefully serve a mission one day. And we were trying to think, at youth conference, there's strange food, there's a strange bathroom, there's strange sleeping, strange bed. And so we tried to think of what would be a good thing to anchor him. And we came up with a friend of his, Hunter Bartley. We wanted to, maybe if he could room with Hunter Bartley, then that would be his rock. And so I called there wasn't a disability specialist. So I called the guy who was in charge of youth conference, and he was in my ward.
Hmm.
And I asked him, hey, I explained the situation about not many away experiences. He wanted to prepare for his mission. And could he just room with a friend, Hunter Bartley? That would probably be a good accommodation for him. And my friend said, the guy said, oh, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, but I can't do it. And we said, well, why not? And he said, because if I do it for you, I have to do it for everyone.
Oh.
And so that made me think that was an example of how we could have had a disability specialist, and it could have made all the difference for us.
Right. Because there were some additional needs there that not everybody had, but
Exactly.
that your
And
child
that's
had,
what a
right?
disability specialist does. It makes everyone feel welcomed and included in the gospel, no
Yeah.
matter what difficulties they face.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And so, I mean, back then you were sort of, as a parent, you without this formal calling, you're just sort of, you just had to navigate it on your own and ask for favors and special permissions and things like that. And so this was the power of a disability specialist, is to have an advocate, right, that you can go to and talk through some of these things and make sure that whatever activity is going on, that there'll be a place for everybody.
Exactly, that there'll be a place for everyone. That is so well said. And that's exactly what we do. The church, as a service missionary, I've seen the church in the Disability Services Department, I've seen the church do so many things and create so many innovations, pioneer programs to reach out to people that struggle. We have state-of-the-art access to buildings now. We have church materials in various formats, ASL and descriptive audio, this kind of thing. We have
Mm-hmm.
seminary and institute programs that emphasize inclusion. The churchofjesuschrist.org/disabilities website is just a treasure trove of resources and goodies. Deseret Industries, they've created the vocational help program, and the service missionary program for young people who maybe can't have that away experience. They can serve from home. And, there's LDS humanitarian services. And so we look at all of these things that the church has done worldwide to reach out to the one. And you ask, what did they do? What have they done on the ward and stake level?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is they built the disability specialist column.
Yeah.
And so there's 5 things that a disability specialist does. They serve as a resource for stake and ward leaders and families and individuals. So what that means is, like, a family might move in that has a child with Down syndrome or an adult with ADHD, and the leaders might ask, can you tell me a little bit about that condition before we meet the family? And or while situations are going on. And we also reach out to those families and see what their needs are, hopefully that to help guide that they would get a good calling and feel just welcomed and fully active. And then, so that's number 1. Number 2 is we get to know and reach out to families that are touched by disabilities. We research all of the members' disability-related questions and concerns. We identify meaningful ways to serve for those with disabilities. And of all the things that we do, I like this one the best. I've been involved in a lot of interfaith projects,
Hmm.
and this is the one that stands out. That we need people that have that are touched by different issues to have callings that lead us, and we have to have them serve others. Of course, we lead and serve them, and that's the expectation. But the key thing here is that we need people with any kind of need to be involved in leadership, always to grow spiritually, and to reach out and serve. And the reason for that is that we know every person is born with every breath of perfection in the spirit. But the only difference is our physical bodies that we're born into.
Hmm.
And so if those who struggle, if they don't lead others, then we miss out on their gifts and talents. And also, the Savior's life was a life of service. And so, how can anyone get to know the Savior if they're not serving?
Yeah.
And then the last thing we do is we identify community resources to help church members. So a lot of the times, we're all volunteers and ward council meets, and they often need services that are outside the church. So you can call the disability specialist, and the disability specialist will help find services that are outside of the church. For instance, we've helped with members collect disability and sign up for that. School resources, we've gone to IEPs and helped with families' needs in school, helping brainstorm and find needs, answers to what they need. And so this kind of thing. So we work with families, with individuals, and with leaders equally.
Yeah.
And we also work inside and outside of the church. We get to do a lot of missionary work, inviting those that aren't in the church to come on to our activities and let them know that they'll be welcomed and included fully. And so that's pretty much what the calling does.
Yeah, love it. And one thing, and I'd like to maybe go through some different segments of the type, because there's a variety of everything from working with children, mental disabilities, physical disabilities, elderly, and all these things. But so one thing that's jumped out at me when you said it is that often, I forget how exactly you put it, but often, for children, they're going to be engaging in a church class long before they engage in a school class, right? Where, and that's a whole nother area to navigate for parents and family and whatnot. And so that's helpful to realize that you may have parents who aren't quite sure what their child needs because they've never done the classroom setting thing, right? It's like, well, my kid likes to pretend he's Godzilla, and I don't know what that looks like in a classroom. In the living room, it's sort of okay most of the time, right?
No, definitely. And there's a lot of things we do when we work with primaries. For instance, we can do teacher trainings about how to shake up your teaching style for alternative style learners. In primary, kids struggle with focus. And so anything that the teacher's busy, the teacher is a volunteer, so the teacher is going to concentrate on the spiritual lesson and having the kids feel touched during and hopefully learn some of the gospel. But,
Hmm.
the emphasis in primary is having them feel the Lord's love through the experiences of the classes and the activities. And so what we can do is we can anything that causes a distraction or is a non-teaching aspect of primary that might be getting in the way of teaching and the kids feeling the spirit, we can help with. Like maybe
Hmm.
we can get fidgets for the kids. Maybe they need to be, we can do an observation in the classroom and then we can make suggestions like maybe they need a room with more natural light. Or we had some older kids in primary that where the girls were rolling their eyes and it made the teacher really uncomfortable. And so what we did was we brought in paper. We brainstormed a bunch of ideas. We brought in paper and pens and had the kids draw the lesson as the teacher was teaching.
Hmm.
And so while the teacher was teaching, you can't roll your eyes when your eyes are on your paper.
Yeah.
And so, all these things that we can do to adapt the situation are easy and almost always free.
Yeah. And when you mention like training and whatnot, like does the church have specific resources that, like, if a disability specialist is called, like, are there certain lessons or things they can go through with if there is a
Yes,
specific need?
there's a whole training online, and there is a so you can watch videos, and then we have access to all kinds of uh, introduction, paperwork that you can read
Hmm.
that introduces the different aspects of the calling. What do I do now that I'm called? And also, I help personally mentor people from around the world who have just been called, and so I'll help them, sort of guide them. And so we have various levels of support we give to disability specialists, because that can be hard. Often a disability specialist is called and they've never done the calling before, and there's nobody who's done it before them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of stakes are going to experience that. It's new, but it's not really that new, and so hopefully, let's get with the program, folks.
Exactly. No, 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 no. But I'm so happy that you mentioned seniors. Seniors are so hard because they get issues slowly. So maybe they don't think of themselves as someone who is hearing impaired, or they don't think of themselves as someone who has trouble with vision.
Yeah, yeah,
And so we love to help with seniors, and that works in the Elders Quorum and also Relief Society.
yeah. Well, but before we jump there, I have a few questions in the context of primary and children, because sometimes this is maybe can feel like I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's such early on in their life, and so they haven't maybe developed coping strategies or tactics to just help them adapt to an environment like a classroom, right? And um, so I would imagine there's a lot to consider there. So a disability specialist may, I'm guessing, working with a primary presidency, maybe recommending, hey, this class, since Kevin's in this class, let's you may want to call an additional teacher, and here's some strategies of some fidgets he may need, or here's what to do during singing time if he suddenly wants to run circles around the room, or things like that. Is that what this interaction may look like?
Yeah, sometimes the solution is to have somebody called as sort of a one-on-one helper, but it would be a class helper.
Hmm.
So we're not singling out the individual that struggles.
Right.
And sometimes it's the parent, but most of the time it's another member. So sometimes you'll call two so that they can rotate going to, adult classes every other week and help with the primary in that class every other week.
Hmm.
And so, but I have had people with trepidation that were nervous to accept a calling like class aid, but
Yeah.
then once they get called, they stay in forever. They love it. It's one of their favorite callings. And
Yeah.
so, no, but thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Talking about resources, we have another resource. We have a Facebook group and an Instagram. The Facebook group is called Disability Specialists, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So easy. And we have all kinds of things posted in there, and disability specialists join, and those that support the disabilities program that the church has. And we have people, they'll post scenarios they're having. Like they'll say, we don't have building access for a wheelchair. How did you, who have one, get one? And I used to have to respond when the Facebook group was new. We have about 4,000 members right now, and we're trying to reach out to everyone who's touched by a different issue. And we, they'll post scenarios, and I used to have to answer them all, or I felt a need to answer them all. But
Hmm.
now, sometimes people will post something at night, and then in the morning they'll have 20 responses. And
Yeah.
at first I wondered why that is, but we have members around the world that are disability specialists.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that our Facebook group um, is a crackerjack resource. Disability Specialists, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Cool. Yeah, and we'll link to all those in the show notes, because I'm in the Facebook group, and it's remarkable the type of things that come up there. Part of this, I wonder how much of a struggle this is as far as like identifying the needs, because I think with maybe more severe autism, or obviously a physical ailment that's obvious, is easy to identify. But is there any advice you'd give as far as if if someone's just trying to identify? Because I worry that some bishops or leaders are saying, oh, well, we don't have any disabilities in our ward, so we probably don't need a disability specialist, right?
Something you've hit on is that you don't have to have a diagnosed disability to work with us.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to have a need.
Yeah.
And we found that once people chat about it, everyone knows someone that could use some support. We act as extra ministering sisters and ministering brothers to families whose situations get complicated. And sometimes, you're right, the disability or the issue they struggle with is visible, but sometimes it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And so one strategy we use is constantly checking in with the leaders. We have the ward specialists go to ward council, and I go to state council, and we help with things like the trek. We help with maybe ministering matchups, and just whatever the needs are of the wards and the stake, we try and jump in. And when you're in the council, you're part of the natural discussion. So you can chime in and say, hey, you know what? We have services in the community that can help seniors. Or we can say, you know what? I'd love to come into that classroom and do an observation and see if I can help. Or you say, I'd like to be another ministering sister to that family. You can say, I'd love to reach out to that family. Maybe they're new, and or maybe they're less active because they didn't feel like they were included. And so maybe you start out as their minister, and then you explain. Another technique is I like to disclose to everyone that I'm a disability specialist and what a disability specialist does. And sometimes people think about it, and then they will reach out to me later and say, I'm having this issue. Can you help?
Yeah.
We also try and speak in church, and we're working on speaking in state conference. And so that we're constantly reminding the leaders and the members that we're there.
Yeah, I'm sure it's even just as powerful to in the beginning of Sunday school, or walking into elders' quorum release sign, just saying, "Hey, FYI, I am the ward disability specialist, and here's 5 things I focus on. And if I can be of service, help me and or reach out to me." And that's 2 minutes or less of their time in the class, and now everybody's sort of aware, right? And sort of doing that on a regular basis can help everybody be aware. Yeah.
And then the more people reach out to you, the more comfortable you get with reaching out. Luckily, sometimes families are a little bit like, I don't really want to talk about it, and that's okay. Our job as disability specialists is not to throw people through the door with their struggles. Our job is to bring them to the door and help them open it, and put your arm out and invite them to come in.
Right. Yeah. Is there, and I'm also thinking in the context of maybe a primary presidency has identified 1 or 2 children in primary who are just overly disruptive, right? And it's not necessarily that there's a diagnosis there or disability, but just as they talk about it, say, hey, why don't we loop in the disability specialist? Not because there is an obvious disability, but maybe there's a more subtle ADHD or ADD type of thing, right?
Yep. Oh my gosh, Kurt, you have exactly hit on the kind of thing we love.
Okay, cool.
What we'll do is we'll reach out to the family, and most families are receptive. Luckily, no one's run screaming from the church from a reach out, but you have to remember that the disability specialist is called and set apart to do this work. And so we prayerfully reach out to the family, and if the family's not interested, we'll probably do just a general class visit, and we try and figure out ways to help the teacher, to give them ideas. Sort of like I mentioned, we had some really struggling sunbeams, and they're the little ones and they run around. And so we just thought, well, maybe what we'll do is we had one member of the class that was really, really struggling, but other members, it distracted them. And so what we did was we brought in a huge thing of goldfish. And as the teacher sat down with them and began to do the lesson and talk to the kids, they put out 2 pieces of goldfish for each kid. And so the kids were concentrating on the goldfish and getting that positive reinforcement. And slowly but surely through class, because there's no rule that says you have to give all the snack at the end of class.
Right.
And so slowly but surely during the class, they'd give out 2 more goldfish and 2 more goldfish. And that ended up working throughout the entire year. The kids loved that. The
Yeah.
teacher loved that. But we want to support, we are in charge of, we're directed to support the leaders as well as the individuals, as well as the families.
Yeah.
And so it's maybe the families not, at that point, which I totally understand. Um, Getting diagnoses for my kids was devastating. And I always, am so sympathetic to people that are struggling. Um, I would never blame them for not wanting to work, but we want to support the teacher. We want to support the situation.
Yeah.
And so we equally work with leaders, teachers, individuals, and families.
Right. And hopefully, I mean, before this type of resource, I think there was a lot of primary teachers who just asked to be released because it was just too much for them to, Sundays were not a positive experience for them. Right. And they wanted to, to be a positive experience. So, anything in the context of, I would imagine sometimes people don't, I don't know, they don't want to make a fuss out of their disability. They'd rather not bring it up, or they're afraid if they reach out to the disability specialist that more people will know. And then there's sort of this special project, on Sundays or whatnot. Any examples come to mind in that around that topic?
One thing I love that you've touched base on is the fact that you don't have to have a disability specific disability to work with us.
Yeah.
And so we've had people with all kinds of issues. And sometimes they're temporary, like people don't feel well and they have trouble being consistent at church. They have trouble being consistent doing their calling. And so they'll reach out to us and they'll say, that this is what they're struggling with. And they will consult with the leaders if they're comfortable and make sure they have a calling where they can be, supportive but active in leading.
Yeah.
And so, but we have that a lot. And you don't have to have a specific disability to work with us. You just have to have a need. And everyone knows someone that has a need, and everyone has needs. So the disability specialist is a little bit of a misnomer. It is to include everyone.
Yeah.
And also, I want to make sure that I emphasize the point that you don't have to have you don't have to have any specific experience or background to be a disability specialist.
Right.
Anybody can be one. All you have to have is the desire to serve, which so many have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's definitely, I mean, I don't want to pigeonhole anybody in a specific calling, but there's just certain people who are just they just have a knack for being patient and caring and present
Yeah,
with people.
yeah.
And those people come to mind as leadership praise over this calling. Anything that we haven't mentioned in the context of adults with disabilities?
Well, we work closely with the relief societies and the elders quorum presidencies, and we find out about adults mostly in ward council. And then, one big issue is anxiety and depression. The difficult sisters of anxiety and depression. And so that is the number one thing that we have had mentioned to us. So again, reaching out to the individuals. Sometimes we do, like right now, we're working on a fifth Sunday with a speaker who can share about anxiety and depression. And so we're right now we're brainstorming what can we do with anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
But we've had adults come to us. A lot of people have adult kids, as I do, and you're gonna consistently be in a situation where you can brainstorm and help those. Make sure that everyone has a calling. We have a young man in our ward that's amazing, and he has the calling of assisting the elders quorum president. We had with service and ministering, and that's been an amazing experience. We had a gentleman who had Down syndrome, and an adult, and they called him to be. He loved numbers, but wasn't maybe that great at them, and so we called him to be the ward called him to be the assistant executive secretary or clerk. And so what he did was he counted the people every Sunday.
Oh, cool.
And so, what a public calling, what a great thing to have happen. And he would count the people, and then he just wasn't that great at numbers, though he loved them. So his dad was called with him. So he would count the people, and then his dad would count the people afterward, and they would compare notes and decide on a number together.
Cool. Yeah.
And then this individual would report it to the member of the bishopric that was interested in the statistics.
Hmm.
And and then this way, everyone was noticed. Everyone who came was noticed and appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. With adults, I'm thinking in the context of callings, and you touched on it just now. Is there anything else you'd mention as far as, sometimes it's easy to sort of move a name off the list of consideration just because of a specific disability, but maybe there's more of a reason to lean into that and say, well, maybe if we did call this person to this role, how would we make that work? It may take some additional resources, but let's see if we can make that work, right?
No, absolutely. It is so important that those who struggle are leading, serving in callings. We need their gifts and talents, and also that they are getting to serve. And so it's very important to keep those people on your list of callings and be prayerful
Hmm.
about how they can help. Every member needs a friend and a calling,
Hmm.
and that's just as true with everyone. And so, but you can get creative with callings. We had a mother of some kids with special needs, and she helped with the activities in young women. And she was always thinking of these brilliant ideas and was really entertaining
Hmm.
when it was her time to present. And so often, people have those unique gifts and talents, and those are exactly what we need. And we all need them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the idea that you mentioned with the Down syndrome individual, that there's sort of these opportunities that they don't have to be the secretary of the elders quorum or the executive secretary, but what if you create an assistant secretary, depending on their disability, and that may be awesome opportunity. You see this in high school teams, right?
Yep.
They make the water boy or the team manager is someone with a disability, and they feel so involved. They get a jersey, all these things that you make a space for them, and it's not like they're contributing a ton per se, on paper, but nonetheless they feel involved. People are helping them, and it's a great experience.
No, for sure. And also, if someone's maybe not in great health because they're a senior,
Yeah.
uh, maybe they need to be called with the young people.
Hmm.
Everyone has um, different strengths, and we want to go with those. So you can brainstorm with the family, you can brainstorm with the individual, and you can brainstorm with the leaders and say, where are the needs? And try. Think out of the box. And you'll hit, you'll be prayerful about it, and you will hit a good spot for everyone.
Yeah. Um, I remember as growing up in my ward, we had a couple who that both of them were blind, and they both had a seeing eye dog. And so every growing up, there was always just two dogs in my sacrament meeting. And I remember I stepped on them a few times passing the sacrament and upset the dog. But and I think the church just recently released some information about service animals. Anything that you would mention as far as service animals? Because this has been like there's been a gray area a lot that someone will claim they have a service animal and they want to bring their little chihuahua to church, but there's maybe some more official service animals and not so official. So if a bishopric has a question about a service animal, what do they do?
Well, the church just issued new guidelines,
Okay.
and maybe we can put a link to that in
Okay.
the.
Yeah, we'll do that and call it good. So,
Yeah. Okay.
anything else as far as adults with disabilities, and maybe this is a good segue into I want to talk about elderly or seniors with disabilities, because these are individuals who maybe went their whole life without a disability, and suddenly their knees go out or they need a walker or things like that. Anything come to mind with that?
Well, any kind of mobility issue, we're going to want to help,
Hmm.
and we're going to, um, we'll brainstorm what kinds of activities are best. Maybe our ward should try and do a lot of stuff at the pavilion, or once we're inside of a facility, we'll stay inside and maybe not travel so much around the facility. Um, that's one of the things we do is try and make sure that our activities and services are revolve around what everyone needs, so everyone can feel included.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the seniors, a lot of this work, like the disability specialist can't do it all, so a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the work is done supporting the ministering brothers and the ministering sisters who are already there on the ground, not necessarily getting called to be that person's ministering sister or brother, but you gain insights when you befriend people, when you visit them in their home. And those insights are so valuable. They're little nuggets to how we can reach out to everyone. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't necessarily have to be the disability specialist directly,
Right.
but
Love it.
you hit it, visible and invisible, maybe medical, maybe psychological. Everybody has something different, and I want to encourage members to reach out to their disability specialist, because if you don't have one, ask your bishop. Can we call someone? Ask your stake president. Can we call someone? Families are particularly great advocates to get someone called. If you get a couple of families know each other. Families that struggle know each other. And so they'll reach out to each other and they'll say, let's us 3 families go together to the bishop.
Yeah.
And that can be really influential. It's right in the bishop's handbook. There's a link to the job description, and there's all kinds of training online, and there's the support of our Facebook group. People can reach out to me directly if they would like. Maybe we can put my information in the link.
Sure.
And
Yep.
but no, sometimes leaders don't catch the vision that quickly.
Right.
And so there seems to be a process. We also have a short 3-minute video that talks about the calling, and that way maybe the leader or the quorum president doesn't have to read a link. It can be so laborious to read, but we have a 3-minute video that talks about the calling in a nutshell. But the idea of everyone catching the vision, everyone knows someone and everyone struggles with something. So
Yeah.
this calling is for everyone, and it's for every ward and stake throughout the world. And someday there will be a disability specialist in every ward and stake, and that will be a great day.
I agree for sure. You mentioned mobility issues, and I remember when I was serving as bishop, another bishop in the building that I was in was called, and he was a quadriplegic. And so I remember they shut down the chapel for 6 weeks or something as they put in a lift so he could get on the stand. We were in a really old building, like 1930s, building. And I thought that was great. We just had sacrament meeting in the cultural hall for a few weeks, and as they put that in, and then he was able to serve as a bishop that way. And so I would imagine if you recognize a mobility issue, or especially how in Utah there's a lot of old buildings that simply they didn't have ramps or things back then, a call to the physical facilities could maybe start a conversation that would lead to solving the mobility issues as far as like entering the building or accessing.
Definitely.
We had an elevator as well. We had 2 floors in that building. Whatnot. So is that a fair resources?
That's exactly right. And there is a facilities manager for every building. And if you're confused about how to find it, we'd be grateful to be able to help you
Mm-hmm.
and get in touch with that person. And at headquarters, there's facility managers as well. And things that benefit those that struggle benefit everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're pulling carts there's going to be an activity and you're pulling carts in, and it would be so much better to have a ramp. It helps everyone. The things that help the one help the many.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but also planning activities and services around the needs of, this work is specific. It's the one, it's the ward, it's the stake. And every stake and ward is different. Every family is different. Every individual is different. And so the idea is to find out what could be helpful to you. And then 9 times out of 10, that's going to be helpful to others.
Right. I'm curious where, like, if somebody's listening wants to know if their ward or stake has a disability specialist, is it? I'm just looking at my app, not to call my stake out here or anything, but when I go to the stake organization, and I would assume it would be listed under other callings, and
Yeah,
then
it's listed under
additional,
other callings.
and then additional callings, and it should be there, right?
It
So,
should be there.
all
And
right,
so
my
if
stake
not,
president's getting a stern text from me after this.
good. No. Reach out with love. Reach out with
Oh, right,
love.
of course, yeah. But that's where they would go to see if they had a stake or ward disability specialist, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And a lot of people post on our Facebook group and they say, I don't know if I have one. We tell them, talk to the bishop, talk to the stake president. You can ask the leader specifically, and that'll bring up the topic.
Yep.
And but every ward and stake needs one. They may not just know it yet.
That's right. That's right. I did want to touch lastly on just the support to families. I did an interview with a bishop. His name is Stan Beagley, and he has a son with an adult son with severe autism that lives with them. And sometimes it was, I forget in what context, but sometimes his wife, he's the bishop, and his wife wanted to go to church too. So every once in a while, depending on if it was a rough day for their son, someone would come to their home so the wife could go to church, or sometimes they hadn't slept in 4 days because their son was just having struggle sleeping, and so they brought somebody in from the ward to just sit with in the home, and so that the parents could get some sleep. Is that the type of support that we should be aware of for
That's definitely
families,
a
right?
type of support. Yes. A lot of families don't come. A lot of our families that are more intensely affected, that they don't come. They try to, as with my experience, they tried to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
And so, no, the idea is to keep reaching out, keep trying to find individual needs. But I love the idea of the calling, of thinking out of the box, of someone to help with the family, maybe in home.
Mm-hmm.
And your idea earlier of the one-on-ones, those have been really popular in not even just in primary, but in young women.
Yeah.
And we had a young man in our state who was developmentally young men age, and so they talked about the situation, and they decided that that young man was going to stay. He's an adult. He's going to stay in young men. And so he did the activities with the young men. He went to their classes, and it was a perfect match. And everyone loved having Rudy there, and Rudy loved being in the young men. And so it was a perfect match. Now, maybe as he gets older, he might age out of that. And when he's ready for that, you're going to make another accommodation, because these situations are always evolving, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we also had an adult woman in one of the wards that she was developmentally about 6. Her name was Rosie. And so she got bored in Relief Society.
Mm-hmm.
She would wander the halls. And so everyone brainstormed, well, what might be a better solution for this? And she was called as an assistant primary teacher in the 6-year-old class. And so, but nobody had more fun than Rosie. She would participate during general primary. She loved her classes, and she would help pass out stuff extra. And sometimes they'd often ask Rosie, "What do you think about this?" She had unique insights, and so it was a leadership calling for her, and it was a win-win. The kids loved being in Rosie's class, and all the kids that were younger were counting down the days until they could be in Rosie's class. And
Cool.
also, nobody sang more boisterously than Rosie during the primary sacrament meeting.
Uh-huh.
And so she just sang and led the way. And so thinking outside the box, you're absolutely right. Thinking outside of the box. And maybe we try a whole bunch of things. We brainstorm, we try a whole bunch of things, and they don't work. Well, we can figure out another bunch of things. Every month, the ward disability specialists meet at my house, and we have a round table where we talk about what's going on in our wards, and I talk about what's going on in the state. But a lot of the times, things that are happening in one ward are happening in other wards.
Right.
And I like to befriend other state disability specialists, because a lot of times things that are going on in my state are going on in other states. We have so much more common than not. But we sit at those meetings and we support each other, and then we also think of ideas for each other. And so if you and the leader and the family have come up with ideas and they didn't work, the disability specialist can bring it to the round table. And then we also have the Facebook group. So you can ask people all around the world, what did you do about this? How can I do better here?
Yeah.
And so there's as long as you're being prayerful about it, solutions will come, and they are so rewarding. There's no better work.
Love it. Anna, this is fantastic. Any other point, principle, concept you want to make sure we hit on before we wrap up?
Well, I just wanted to say again, the calling's for everyone. Everyone knows someone or has themselves some sort of issue they're struggling with, and we want to help. And so please try and remember your disability specialist. And for those who are disability specialists, remember that we're all in this together, and that you don't have to have any specific insights. You don't have to have any specific education or work experience in order to serve. You just have to be willing to just relish the opportunity to help people with their needs.
Love it. Well, and the last question I have for you, as you reflect on your time as a stake disability specialist, how has being a leader in this role helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
Well, it has helped me in every way. You know, it's helped me to feel heard. It's helped me to feel inclusion. Um, it couldn't be more rewarding getting to meet the families, meet the individuals, talk to the leaders. And in terms of myself, my prayers are so much more intense. I get to see and notice more blessings that come, more aha moments that people get. And a lot of times, by the time we get a situation, you know, it's desperate, and a family's staying home, or someone has quit their primary calling, or they're thinking of on their last legs of trying to keep someone included. And so those are extra rewarding because we get to come in, and you can feel it's the Savior's work. When you're prayerful about it and new things are revealed, there's nothing more exciting than getting to befriend and getting to get the Lord's help. But as I mentioned, most things can be solved relatively quickly, and the solutions are fun and free. And discovering those is one of the best journeys of this calling.